Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. We're going to talk about Professor Dungeon Master, and specifically, I want to call out Professor Dungeon Master today for repeating what, in my opinion, is a very powerful, very wrong, very destructive OSR lie about Lorraine Williams. In my humble opinion, he repeated it recently. I don't think he did it. I think he did it out of ignorance and not out of ill will or a purposeful prejudice. I think it's just an ignorance and also a lack of commitment. I think Professor Dungeon Master is a man trying to live in two worlds. He's trying to live in the OSR world, and he's trying to live in the Dungeons & Dragons 5e world. Go back just 5-6 videos, and you'll hear him saying, "Hey, I support Wizards of the Coast, and I support Dungeons & Dragons, and I want Wizards of the Coast to be successful with Dungeons & Dragons." And then almost immediately you'll find another video, the one with where he talks about Matthew Mercer and Critical Role having to pay, because of the new OGL changes. And what you'll see there is him saying, "Oh, I need to reflect. Do I need, and 2023 is going to be us determining what our future is with Dungeons & Dragons." And if you guys, sorry I'm burying the lead here, but this will all connect. Thanks for your patience. And he's saying, and if you guys haven't noticed, the great Grognard Exodus is beginning, right? Who's the first? AJ Pickett, right? And he just literally did a video saying goodbye D&D, and there's another video I just saw, with another person saying, "I'm leaving D&D." They're frustrated with one D&D, they're frustrated with changes, and so one of the best D&D commentators out there, Professor Dungeon Master, is a man trying to live in two worlds, and I think he has OSR allies, and at the same time he's D&D 5e champion, but he's going to have to pick a lane, because the reality is I think he just very distinctly repeated an incredibly, in my opinion, dangerous OSR lie that's been around for 25 years. And I think he did it just because he has OSR allies, he listens to them, right? And he doesn't realize how destructive a lot of the ideas that bounce around in the OSR. Not all ideas that bounce around in OSR, not all OSR champions, but there's some dangerous, in my opinion, dangerous individuals in the OSR, and some incredibly dangerous ideas in the OSR. And if you think I'm wrong, you think I'm talking about a boogeyman, go look at NUTSR from last year. Look at the kind of nonsense they're trying to attach to Dungeons and Dragons, and frankly to the Gygax legacy. Incredibly dangerous, in my opinion. All right. So, what was the lie that Professor Dungeon Master said? He said when TSR fired Gary Gygax. Right now, okay. So first of all, I'm linked below, literally to the sentence where he says it. Okay, Professor Dungeon Master. Also linked below. Okay, the Wikipedia page, where there are, and the Wikipedia page, and in the Wikipedia page, go to the section that says Gygax leaving TSR, right? And you will find there two sentences that state very clearly, and I've known this for a long time, and you will find videos right on this channel, like pushing back on this exact same OSR lie, right? The exact same OSR lie, right? Because it's been repeated for 25 years that Lorraine, and what they're saying is it's not about TSR, right? Because at this time, Lorraine Williams was the CEO of TSR and the head of Dungeons & Dragons, right? And she pushed down on Gary and was like, "Hey, I'm not gonna," and actually she didn't push down on Gary. So basically what happened is, you'll see in my link below where it says clearly, right? Now, I definitely think Gary felt some pressure from Lorraine Williams, and that pressure was for him to get straight and get right? That's the issue, okay? But in my link below, you will see two sentences that says Gary Gygax resigned from TSR and settled all disputes with TSR, okay? And he was leaving of his own accord. There's absolutely and I defy you, I invite you, okay? I'm saying right now, okay, that basically Professor Dungeon Master is repeating, out of ignorance, in my opinion, he is repeating an old 25-year-old OSR lie that Lorraine Williams fired Gary Gygax. That is outrageously false, and it is destructive to the legacy of Lorraine Williams, and it is just false. It's a false narrative, okay? And it doesn't match facts of any kind. In my links below, you will find in the Wikipedia page that discusses Gary Gygax leaving TSR that he resigned and he settled all disputes with TSR, and he left of his own accord. There was no firing, okay? And that 2 sentences in that Wikipedia page section on Gary Gygax, you will find 3 sources, 3 cited sources in 2 sentences saying that this OSR lie is false, okay, in my humble opinion, and clearly that what Professor Dungeon Master said is outrageously false, in my humble opinion, okay? But let's get to the truth of it, okay? There's my sources, Professor Dungeon Master, right? There's my sources, OSR, okay? And it's, you know, it's factual, right? It's right there. It's got 3 separate sources said, no, TSR never fired Gary Gygax. He resigned and he settled all disputes with TSR. And then he left of his own accord, right? There's my sources. Where are yours? Okay? OSR, where's your sources that say Lorraine Williams fired Gary Gygax? Because it's not true, right? But Professor Dungeon Master is saying it right here, okay? Now, why is an intelligent man like Professor Dungeon Master saying flat out that TSR fired Gary Gygax? Tell you why. He's got OSR allies, right? And they repeat this lie constantly. Why did they repeat this lie constantly? And by the way, the OSR allies are thick, right? So there's 3 books, right? And there's 2 more in addition to the books I'm going to list. I think Slaying the Dragon, I think Empires of Imagination, I think Of Dice and Men, and 2 more academic level coverages of TSR's and Gary Gygax's and Dungeons & Dragons history all frame this, all do their framing to point to Lorraine Williams and say, Lorraine Williams is a bad business manager. Lorraine Williams was unfair to Gary Gygax, right? And it's outrageous. It's an outrageous falsehood that's been held up by these academic books, all written by middle-aged white men, right? And that's one of the problems is right now, Dungeons & Dragons design is held hostage by middle-aged white men. What do I mean? I mean that every single design lead ever at the top level of D&D has been a middle-aged white man. I'm right about that. You can see it all the way through, right? Again, I defy you to show me any evidence that any of this is not true, right? I'm inviting you. I don't defy you. I invite you, right? Let's get to the truth of it. My sources are below, okay? You said that TSR fired Gary Gygax. Professor Dungeon Master, where's your source, right? It never happened. I'm telling you this. And I know, Professor Dungeon Master, I think you're an agent in good faith, right? You're trying to move forward and do D&D commentary in a fair manner. But you got OSR allies, and I don't think you have any idea how dangerous the OSR, the concepts that they're trying to put forward. Like the other day, I heard a commentator, everybody talking about the OGL, and they're like, well, nobody's debating that we shouldn't attach racism to D&D. There's a lot of people debating that, right? I think there is a lot. And I think if you look in the OSR channels, you're going to find some people who are like, wait a second, what about you want to make sure that I can't, produce D&D, products with D&D and racism? What the heck? Like, there's a ton of it being said in OSR, right? On OSR channels. Like, just look around. You will find them, right? People are very upset with the idea that they can't attach racism to Dungeons & Dragons within the OGL 1.1. So, Professor Dungeon Master, you're just flat out wrong on this. I'm calling you out and I'm asking you to correct it, right? And I don't think you meant any ill will. I don't think you were trying to push forward lies from the OSR. I just think you have OSR allies and you listen to them. I listen to my allies too, right? But when you're wrong, and you got to say it and you got to admit it. And this is damaging to the very powerful, very good legacy of Lorraine Williams. Between 1986 and 1997, here's the part the OSR won't tell you, right? They won't tell you that Lorraine Williams was handpicked to carry the legacy of Dungeons & Dragons forward by Gary. And here's why. From 1974 to 1986, he burned the candle at both ends, okay? Powerfully, right? And he crushed it from 1987, I think, until about 1983, right? But in 1983, some of his personal, behavioral, choices were beginning to catch up with him. And in 1986, he was in no condition to be the commercial leader or the creative leader of D&D, and he was both, right? And I think he knew he was in a bad place personally, and that D&D had to live beyond him, right? And he carried forward the next part of his plan, which was to put Lorraine Williams in position, make Dungeons & Dragons the most progressive tabletop role-playing game in history, right? And guess what? The owner of Dungeons & Dragons has another female CEO right now called Cynthia Williams with literally the same last name, right? So there is a history of progressiveness, and the OSR doesn't want to talk about this. They don't want to admit it, right? And the reality is, Gary was not fired, right? What happened was, if he was going to continue in D&D, he absolutely had a path to do that. He needed to shut his mouth, get at his desk, and start doing supplement support work for modules without a byline. And he needed to do it for 3 to 5 years, and he needed to submit to Lorraine Williams. And Gary Gygax, brilliant man, genius. He brought an incredible amount of narrative change. He brought the most powerful narrative platform that's ever been produced in humanity. And he did something that is a global smash hit. And there's debates on how important and how valuable Dungeons & Dragons is. But what he did in 1974 to 1983 is undisputably one of the most powerful transformations of human narrative that's ever existed. Okay? But in 1986, his hubris, and I think he knew this, he picked her to carry the game forward, and she did. She carried the game forward from 1986 to 1997. She built incredible value into the brand to the point where in 1997 it could be sold for over $60 million, and it was flipped 2 years later for an even larger sum. She knew Lorraine Williams knew the future of business. She knew that debt didn't mean a thing. And there are entire industries right now that run 5, 10, 15 years on debt and never produce a single issue of profit. And there are people lined up to continue to invest money in those businesses, right? So she just simply knew the future of business. And none of these, middle-aged white men reports of D&D history give her any credit for this. And they continue to smash down Lorraine Williams' legacy, which is wrong. And you're better than it, Professor Dungeon Master. Don't be part of this. Don't be part of this OSR lie trying to smash down the legacy of Lorraine Williams and steal the incredible guardianship that she did. We rest on it. We sit at the top of a mountain of success that came from Gary and came from Lorraine. Don't be part of that OSR group that's trying to tear down and build up a mountain of lies around Lorraine so that her history cannot be seen. I think you're better than this, Professor Dungeon Master, and I'm calling you to correct it. And I appreciate your content. I watch every video you make. You're a brilliant man, and I know what it's like to have allies and want to, identify with them. But in this case, you're on the wrong side of history. No two ways about it, right? You're getting your history wrong, and you're perpetuating what, in my humble opinion, is lies, OSR lies about Lorraine Williams. And we need to get this history right. We need to start defending the true history of Dungeons & Dragons, in my humble opinion. That's my humble opinion. But my sources are cited below. Gary was never fired by TSR. That is not true, in my humble opinion. And I got sources saying it's not true. Where are your sources? I invite the OSR. I invite you, Professor Dungeon Master. If you could show me that I'm wrong, and you could show any credible source that said TSR ever fired Gary Gygax, I will be shocked, but I will look at it, right? Because I don't think it exists, and I think when you go look at it, I think you're going to find it doesn't exist. He resigned, he settled all disputes, and he went out on his own accord. And there was another path. He could have sat at his desk, he could have shut his mouth, he could have buried his hubris, and he could have built trust with Lorraine, right? And at that point in his life, a divorce came very swiftly soon, right? The person he had promised to be with forever, he was breaking promises to her, right? So trust was not deep for Gary Gygax in 1986, but he could have rebuilt that trust. He could have stayed. He could have served under Lorraine Williams. His hubris didn't allow it, right? But he knew what he was doing. He picked her to carry the legacy forward. She didn't fire him, okay? And I think you need to correct that. And you need to stand with people who are interested in the true history of Dungeons & Dragons, not some false mountain of lies the way the OSR, in my humble opinion, is trying to build. All that's my opinion. I'm ready to hear yours. I'm ready to see your sources. Please consider liking and subscribing. Have a wonderful millennium.